Welcome to another episode of Candis Live, and as always, it is fabulous to be here with you today. Now, I have some interesting little tidbits. We're gonna get into it right away. Come on in. Oh, well, guys, listen. That's the word for today. Listen. You know, how good are you at listening to what is happening around you, listening to other people, listening to other person's perspective, listening to what they have going on, and listening to what is going on in your environment, you know? So it's a very hard thing to do. I mean, we don't think about it because we think we're great listeners, as always. You know, from our last episode, I spoke to you about listening to yourself. But this episode, I want to talk to you about listening to what's happening all around you, listening to what's happening to the people in your life, listening to what's happening on your job, listening to what's happening just in the world, and seeing how just listening on a different level can create such a dynamic change. Okay, so here's how we're going to start out. I have two props here, one of which is a leaf. You see leaves all over the place. You know, we're in the middle of a gorgeous little set here, and we have leaves absolutely everywhere. Right now, I'm going to crunch up this leaf, and I want you to listen closely and tell me what you say, what you hear. Now I'm crunching this up real good, and I'm listening, and you know, you don't really hear anything. But that doesn't mean things are not happening. Because see, the leaf is breaking. Things are happening. But then we look at this other leaf here, and as you can see, it's damaged, it's rotted, and it looks obvious, all right? It looks obvious that once I start crushing this, something's gonna happen. Let's try it. Do you hear it? Do you hear that crunching? The funny thing is, when it comes to listening to other people, when it comes to listening to the world around us, we have a tendency to not listen to the things that seem clean, green, and pristine. We don't listen to things that seem perfect. We look at other people's lives and we think to ourselves, man, they have it together. They got everything going on. They got the job, they got the car, they got the house, man. They're making their money. Everything is straight. There's no reason that they should have a problem. There's no reason why I got to be compassionate towards them. What? Never. And then you look at yourself, and you look at yourself, and you look at all the imperfections. You look at the things that you're struggling with. And all of a sudden, when you listen, it sounds like the crunching of that dead leaf. Because you are aware of all of the things that are going wrong, that are not working out. And to you, it sounds like crush, 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 crush. You know, it sounds heavy and hard. But the thing is, when we take the opportunity to listen to other people, through the lens of us understanding that we ourselves need to be heard, all of a sudden we start to hear something different. We start to hear that, just like you, they may be having problems on their jobs. Just like you, they may be having problems with their children. Just like you, they may be having problems with their finances, with their spirituality, or even just their view of themselves. And just like you, they may be thinking that you couldn't possibly understand. And at some degree, they're right. The reason you could not possibly understand is because, number one, you're not listening. Now, I came across this little treasure of knowledge some years ago. One of my youngest son, he was about 3 years old, and he would throw tantrums all the time. I mean, it drove me crazy. You know, I felt like I was in a madhouse dealing with this kid. And we would go back and forth, and and I couldn't understand a word he was saying, so that made it even more frustrating, because he barely spoke English, so I definitely didn't understand what he was saying. And so it was always cry, 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 and I felt like I was just losing it, and he felt as though he was losing it. And so we took a family trip after his 4th birthday. We took a family trip to Washington, D.C. And whilst we were there, we went to see all of these museums and galleries and all of that stuff. And we went to this one exhibit in particular, and it was about the women's suffrage movement. And whilst we were in that exhibit, the kids, because they had a lot of photographs and a lot of writing on the walls and on the roof and on placards and all of these things. And my kids said to me, oh, Mommy, read it for us. Because they were very young, 3, 4, 6. And so they're very young. Read it for us. And so I started to read about the women's suffrage movement for my kids and telling them about the fact that one of the main reasons why the women's suffrage movement was so necessary, because women were not being heard and not being seen. And I remember my then 4-year-old saying to me, Mommy, seen, heard, what does that mean? I said, how if you do something and you explain yourself, how you want someone to understand what you're explaining and respond to whatever it is that you're suggesting? Well, for a lot of years, a long, long time, it was an instance where women were not being heard. It didn't matter how smart they were. It didn't matter how accomplished they were. It didn't matter how much they contributed to life. It did not matter what they were doing or how great they were at doing what they were doing. They were just not heard. And so we went through the entire exhibit, and they were they were so intense. They listened to absolutely everything. They listened to the videos, they listened to the readings, they listened to what the people in the room had to say. And then we went back to the hotel, and a day later we returned to Nassau. A few days after that, we had another meltdown. My now 4-year-old was having a meltdown. And this one was catastrophic. And at this point I was like, oh my God, what am I gonna do with this boy? And so I'm standing in the front room and he's in the dining room and he's shouting, and I'm like, man, come on. And he says to me, Mommy, you're not listening to me. And I said to him, I am listening to you. Now I made it my business to hear every single word that he said. I was intent on hearing every single word that he said. So I said to him, you said X, Y, and Z. This is what you said. And then he says to me, Mommy, you're not listening to me. You're hearing the words that are coming out of my mouth, but you are not listening to me. You do not have to agree with me, but you need to listen to me. My mind was blown. Because there was my 4-year-old, who was just 3, who was just having meltdowns, who was just, trying to blow up my whole life, at least that's how I felt, had reprimanded me, had put me in my place to let me know that, guess what? You are hearing my words. And that's all you're hearing. Because you can repeat them, so I know you heard my words. But you have not taken the time to understand where I'm coming from. I don't need you to agree with my position, but I need to feel as though you hear me. I need to feel as though what I'm saying is valid. I need to feel as though what I've taken the time to express to you, to relate to you, has not fallen on deaf ears. Now, this was my 4-year-old saying this to me. So, I was a little ashamed, I was put in my place. But more than shame, I was just so profoundly impacted, because it caused me to readjust the way that I respond to people and the way that I deal with people. I've always been that person. I sit in the background. I watch and I look and I look and I watch. And then when I get ready to talk, boy, I talk. And I think somewhere in there, because this has always been my routine, I forgot to listen in a way that demonstrates to the person that I'm conversing with that I'm hearing their perspective. It's not about what I think about what they say, It's not about what you think about what I'm saying. It's about you putting yourself in a position to see and understand from my perspective, to see and understand from your children's perspective, to see and understand from your boss's perspective, the man in the car who's driving and trying to tear up the place, and you're thinking to yourself, now that's a crazy fella. He out here trying to kill everybody. But is he really out here trying to kill everybody? Or does he have a sick child in the car and he's trying to get to the hospital because he's called 10, 15 times and no one's answering the phone and he doesn't know what else to do but to drive like a maniac to get his child to the hospital? You don't know. You don't know. When he's shouting in the street, get out the way, I have to get to the hospital. Only thing you're hearing is rah, 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 rah. Because what he's saying doesn't really matter to you. But like my 4-year-old said, you do not have to agree with me. But the least you can do is acknowledge that you hear me and you see my perspective. And that's what listening is, you know. No matter where you go, no matter which situation you're in, that is what listening is. Taking the time to see someone else's perspective. Case in point, we're out here in the garden and we would love to have absolute silence. But, you know, out of respect for the fact that we're in nature, we can't. We can't have absolute silence. And so what you hear are birds chirping, and I mean they're at it today. And you hear the crickets chirping, and you hear life happening. And you hear the breeze going through the trees. I mean, just like that. Just like that. Something that should be disruptive. Something that, because we're recording, should be, oh, this is a problem. But here's the deal. This beautiful thing called listening. When we listen to what is happening around us, we understand that, you know what? God is alive. Creation is alive. Not only are we here speaking about an opportunity to connect with each other as human beings, but nature is out here saying, man, I want to connect too. Let me be a part of this show. Come, 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 come. I got something to say. Bring it on in, bring it on in. And we could be upset about this, but you know what? Nah. Because we understand that there is so much more going on in the world outside of what is going on inside of us. The world is so much more bigger. It is so much more layered. And when we approach our lives, we must do it from that perspective. We must listen with empathy. We must listen with the urge to understand. We must listen, giving room to a different perspective. We must listen, not with answers ready and raring to go, but with an openness to see where it takes us. Where does it take us? And when it takes us there, don't start putting in questions. Don't start putting in answers. Put in a couple of questions. Okay, so why are we here? What's happening here? Why is it like that? Why do you think this? You know? And we make it all a part of our journey. And it is only then when we start to incorporate all of these things, all of these questions, dissecting what is happening around us, then we can truly comment on what's going on, because we have truly taken the time to listen. Now, I know a 3-year-old coming up with this thing like, yeah, you spending too much time with those kids. At least that's what my mom says. I spend too much time with my kids and I read too much into everything. But that's the thing. The wisdom that I garner from them is so boundless because they are untainted by all of the experience that life has given me. You know, when they tell me something, they tell me it from a position of absolute purity. This is what I think. This is why I think it. You know, they have nothing to reference it to. They can't say, this is what I think because X, Y, and Z happened. It's simply, this is what I think. This is what I perceive. This is what is going on. Here's what's happening because of that. That's it. The only thing they know how to do is look, listen, and try to understand. So I'm challenging you. I'm challenging you to look, listen, and attempt to understand. Not comment. Look, listen, and attempt to understand. And when you do this, it will be just that little step in creating change daily, not only for you, but all of the people that you come in contact with. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining me for yet another episode of Candis Live. Today, we talked about listening. Listen. See, I said it again. Listen. I can't stop saying it. Listen. That's what we need to do. We need to listen to ourselves. We need to listen to others. We need to listen to nature. We just need to take the time to not be so ready to comment on everything, not be so ready to solve the problem, but just be a part of understanding what the possible solutions may be. And then and only then can we begin to create the type of change that we want in our lives and in our communities every single day. Until next time, I love you.